Hi, it is Michelle, living blue in Texas, coming to you on the Texas Minds Network. I'm here with Derrick Gay. He is running for Congress for, I thought I lost you there. So he's running for Congress for Congressional District 24, which is currently held by Beth Van Doyen. Derrick, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Sorry, yes, my internet in the office there went out at the worst possible time, so so I will
Yeah.
adjust here. Hopefully, there's not too much glare. But I'm doing well. How are you today, Michelle? Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I am excited to talk to you again. So you actually have a runoff. So I just want to kind of get this part out of the way before we get into what's going on with democracy. Um, which when does the early voting start for your runoff?
It starts on May 16th, so May 16th through the 20th, and then the election is on May 24th. So right
May
now we have
24th.
local elections, early voting, so just a lot of confusion, I think, for a lot of voters and everything. So yeah, two elections in May.
Right. And I think they did that intentionally to confuse people. So you guys remember you're supposed to vote twice in May, not in the same election, two different
Yes,
elections.
absolutely.
So you are running for Congressional District 24. And I think it's, kind of important to talk about. I actually have an article on Living Blue in Texas coming out later today about the incumbent in Congressional District 24, Beth Van Doyen, and we'll get into that later. But if anybody is keeping up with what's going on, with January 6th and all the investigations surrounding that, I know it's you, Derrick.
Mhm.
So for some of us that aren't keeping up with it, can you give us kind of a rundown of what you're seeing coming from DC?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a lot of bombshells recently with the
Mhm.
January 6th committee. We have the minority leader Kevin McCarthy's calls leak there, where after saying the New York Times report was completely false, they brought the receipts on that
Yeah.
and shared that audio there where he was going to ask ex-president Trump to resign after January 6th, and just the amount of hypocrisy I think we always knew was there. Things that were being said privately now publicly all of a sudden, oh no, I wasn't saying that. And, I'm a big Trump supporter and everything. It's just, I don't know what it's going to take for the Republican Party to realize that, they shouldn't be backing a disgraced ex-president who's impeached twice and tried to overturn a free and fair election. But I think that starts at the midterms here. It starts in November when we have accountability at the ballot box, and those people that, like my opponent Beth Van Dine, who stands with Trump, was in the Trump administration, and stands for all the worst policies, of the Republican Party right now. Until people like her are voted out of office, that's when we can really regain our democracy and stop this slip towards autocracy that we're seeing.
Yeah. So the January 6th committee, they said that they are going to be completed with their investigation in the summer, probably like
Mhm.
July. There's going to be even more bombshells. Um, Thus far, we have not seen anybody really be held accountable other than the people that have stormed the Capitol on
Mhm.
January 6th. But there are several Congress people from Texas who participated in this, not necessarily with storming the Capitol, but they encouraged it, they spread propaganda. Um, do you think that we will see any accountability for those Congress people?
I have to believe that the rule of law still matters. I have to believe that there will be accountability. I'm anxiously, like a lot of Americans, waiting for the January 6th committee to put out its findings. I understand that there's a lot to unpack there and a lot of depositions, and hopefully we'll get that soon. And I've been hearing the same as far as the timeline coming out in the late summer, early fall. Right before the midterm elections is probably about when we'll know the full extent of it. But we already know that a lot of the Republicans and particularly the Texas delegation on the Republican Party came out and voted to overturn a free and fair election, defied the voters. It's always been just a level of hypocrisy and irony. The party that believes in small government, in Texas, voted to overturn an election in another state. So it's just there needs to be accountability. And if the courts aren't willing to do it, then as voters, we need to get out there and do that and make sure there is a political accountability. Because I really believe that until they start losing elections by being so extreme and so against the will of the people, then there's no incentive for them to break away from Donald Trump. If they didn't do it after January 6th and that's why I got into this race, really the attack on January 6th. I was just appalled. I never imagined that, people from within our own government would vote to overturn a free and fair election, would dishonor their oath that they took to the Constitution. As a Marine who took an oath to defend that Constitution, I felt a sense of duty to run for this seat. And, we're building a great infrastructure, a great team, and I feel like we have everything in place to flip this district in November and give the people of Texas 24 some true representation in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I like it. So my biggest concern, and I'll kind of preface it with a story. I was speaking with a relative of mine not too long ago, and I was talking to her about, the rise of fascism in America. And she just thought I was out of my mind, What are you talking? Oh, you're just, that's so silly. You're being an alarmist. That's what I was called. Do you think that enough people are paying attention to the things that are going on in Washington, D.C.?
I sure hope so. We did see turnout down in the Democratic primary. But there's also a lot of people that are just trying to survive day to day, right? And that's a big reason why I'm in this race as well. You have working families that are struggling. You have rising gas prices, inflation. You have an economy that's not really working for them. It's working for the people at the top. You see, not to bring up Elon Musk and the acquisition of Twitter, but you continue to see more and more power go to the very top. So I think that's an element of it. People are exhausted. The pandemic was difficult. And it's still ongoing, and people are struggling and hurting from that. But there's just so much going on. I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people. So I get why they're focused on the day-to-day struggles and maybe aren't as in tune with what's going on in DC and that push to fascism and authoritarianism that I am so concerned about.
Yeah.
And I always thought our democracy was a lot stronger. I never imagined that we could slip in this direction, and it's so much relied on just faith and custom and good actors in our government. When you have someone like Donald Trump that's willing to just defy those norms, and his enablers in Congress, it just shows how much we really need to strengthen our democracy and put in more safeguards there.
Yeah, and that includes Beth Van Doyne, who, along with every other Republican, voted against the American Rescue Plan. She voted against protecting our democracy. And I think that it's really telling. And, as I'm going through and I'm doing, the research for my article about her, which is coming out later today, I look at her vote record, and it's just every single thing on her voting record. She just voted against, and I'm just going to run through this like really quick. She voted against the Equality Act. She voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the For the People Act, the American Rescue Plan, the Equal Rights Amendment, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization, Paycheck Fairness, protecting older workers from discrimination. She voted against consumer protection, against protecting women's health, voting rights, and not surprisingly, she voted against the Combating Islamophobia Act. So, if I was to ever have a conversation with Beth Van Doyne, which I don't plan on, I wouldn't ask her, what she's for, but I mean, it's like she's not for anything. What does
Absolutely.
she stand for? You know?
Yeah, and another thing I want to highlight, something that's very personal to me, is that Beth Van Dyne had a 2-week social media blitz recently, and it was highlighting our hometown heroes in Texas 24. So just looking at the chat, for those that aren't aware of the district, yes, it is in the Dallas Fort Worth area. It's a huge district that covers with the way they gerrymander and weaves all throughout. So but after 2 weeks social media blitz of highlighting our veterans and calling them hometown heroes, she voted against cancer funding for veterans who were exposed to burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. Saying the cost was too high. And my response to her, and I hope she gets on a debate stage with me if I'm the nominee and in the general. But that debt was already incurred when we sent our combats into when we sent our veterans into combat. Sorry about that. And as a Iraq veteran myself, and have been exposed to the burn pits, it's just appalling to me that someone who's trying to say that she's for the troops and the military could take that vote and vote against that. So on it, like you said, on every issue, she's voted on the wrong way. It's just bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I think is going to provide tremendous benefits for Dallas Fort Worth. Like we're home to the largest concentration of Fortune 500 companies. We're growing rapidly. We have DFW Airport, which through the pandemic was the #2 busiest airport in the world. We desperately need infrastructure investment, but she couldn't even cross the aisle and vote for that. But in every election year, she likes to tout that she's willing to reach across the aisle and find bipartisan solutions. But my question to her is where?
Yeah. Yeah. Where? And I would say that she is not alone in this. We've seen her record. I mean, it's mirrors other Republicans who are in Congress from Texas, Chip Roy, Kevin Brady, Dan Crenshaw. I don't know, all of them really. That they all are against everything that will help and progress America. And it is mind blowing, because we don't understand what they're for. Like it just boggles the mind, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think what they're for is fear mongering and making, trying to divide us. And, I set out on the campaign trail, like, as a Marine and in the civilian sector, the best leaders that I ever worked with, they relied on hope and optimism. They tried to paint a bright picture for the future, and they try to bring people together to achieve that. But sadly, that's not what we see with our Republican Texas delegation. They seek to attack us as the Democratic Party is woke, and the culture wars. They try to focus on that. They try to inflame anger. And fear is powerful, right? It gets people to the polls. It gets people outraged. It distorts the truth. But yeah, exactly. What are they for? What is their vision of America? I haven't really seen anything from them other than, I want to divide the country and I want to make them angry. And that's just not leadership. So really, she's to have people like that, in a position in Washington, D.C., where they're supposed to be leaders, as a father of 2 young kids and a third on the way.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, in September, because we don't have enough going on. So, I want to fight for that future for my children, and I want to provide them a democracy, something that I took for granted, but no longer. So we can do that, and we can provide, like I said, in this district, the huge economy we have here. We can provide an economy that works for more people, that brings more people along in that growth. And that's central to my messaging. I moved to North Texas with my wife to raise our family here, in a large part because the great economy that we have here in North Texas. I worked night shift in a warehouse and saw so many working families that were struggling. And the only reason they work night shift is because they also had a daytime job. So with all this great growth in North Texas, it shouldn't be that hard for people to put food on the table. And we should be able to invest in this economy, invest in our infrastructure, invest in education and healthcare, and really create the jobs of the future. So that's what I'm committed to doing if elected into Washington, D.C. to represent this district.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how they gerrymandered this district. Because if it was not for the gerrymandering, Texas 24 would be an easy flip in November. However, they made it a little bit more difficult.
Mhm.
What I mean, I think that we talked about this before, where they said it was like plus 12 Republican,
Mhm.
was it? So that's a steep cliff to climb up. What is your campaign doing to reach the voters and to make sure that they make it to the polls in November?
Absolutely. So this is a district in 2020 that President Biden won by 5.4%, and the demographics are constantly shifting to the left here politically. So that yes, I feel like the Democratic nominee would be a front runner under the old lines. With the new line, so it went from a district that President Biden won by 5.4% to, as you mentioned, one that Trump would have won by 12% in 2020. But to put this in perspective and why there's so much opportunity in this election is that Mitt Romney, under these current lines in 2012, would have won this district by 39%. So in 8 short years, it moved 27% to the left. So just demographics alone, I think realistically, this is a single digit race. And what I'm seeing out there on the campaign trail, there's um, you know, a lot of people that are looking for just common sense solutions to our country's problems. That I think with a strong economic message you can reach. And when you look at and everything that you mentioned and that I mentioned about my opponent, if I get out of the primary, she's so far on the extreme that it's a very tough position to justify voting for her if you're towards the middle. I believe that there's a lot of independents, there's a lot of former Bush Republicans in this district that don't like the direction of their party, and I want to present them an alternative. Someone that is going to stand for democracy and that's going to fight for a better future and not get caught up in all these crazy pursuits that Beth Van Dyne is doing now. So there's that opportunity for them to come on board. But how are we reaching voters? I think that's something that Beto O'Rourke has done phenomenally well. Something that State Rep Julie Johnson in the district has done incredibly well. We got to go where voters are. We got to have a strong field game. We got to be knocking on doors, and not just those doors of strong Democrats. We need to talk to the middle. We know that people that vote in the primary and show up, we can expect them to show up in November. But we need to get those people that vote in presidential years, but maybe they aren't as involved in midterm years. We need to have that same level of enthusiasm that we saw, that historic election that got Joe Biden elected. That type of turnout. We need that excitement in every race. Because, not to sound too dire, but I fundamentally believe that the shift to autocracy is happening. And, the Republican Party that's in Washington, D.C. and across the country, I think they looked at where democracy held, the secretaries of state and how they stood up across this country. And they went to put Trump backers in there. So a lot of Republicans that were like, whoa, like Liz Cheney, like staunch conservative, right? But she
Yeah,
also stands for democracy. She stood up, and now she's doesn't have a position in that party. Adam Kinzinger, he is not running for reelection. Anthony Gonzalez in Ohio, who had a lot of work that he did with Colin Allred here in Dallas. So a lot of the Republicans that might disagree with them politically, but I, don't disagree with their patriotism. I know that they're doing what they think is best for the country. I think the democracy is on the ballot right now in these midterms. If you have people like Beth Van Dyne voted in and a Republican majority, Republicans across the country and the state level, then 2024, maybe democracy won't hold this time. Maybe the big lie can be spread easier in that environment. So we need to show up with that same level of enthusiasm, and we need to vote people that are going to stand for this country and put country over party.
yeah, absolutely. So I know we spoke a little bit about some of the new revelations that came out, and I think that we'll see more revelations
Mhm.
about people who were involved, Congress people, and different people from levels of government. And I have to mention this because it it's just too funny. So Mark Meadows texts text messages, have now been released. And then, as it turns out, a lot of Congress people were using burner phones. I guess he was a Secretary of Energy who was not using a burner phone. Rick Perry. Not only was he not using a burner phone, but he signed his text messages Rick Perry. So, just kind of going along with, keeping everybody's impression of him as being really stupid. So we probably will see consequences for people like Rick Perry and Louis Gohmert. But we just don't know how deep it's going to go yet.
I think the Marjorie Taylor Greene hearing was so fascinating too, to put her on the stand there and let her perjure herself. But so I mean, there's consequences for that as well. So yeah, I think we live in interesting times. Unfortunately, it's stressful times, and
yeah.
we deserve better than this. But yeah, I think a lot of bombshell revelations are still out there and are still forthcoming.
Yeah. Yeah. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she doesn't recall. I don't recall. I don't remember. I don't recall. I don't remember.
Exhibit A. Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, actually,
What I meant.
yeah. So everybody knew that she was absolutely full of it. So we'll see what happens on that front. So let's say hypothetically, you do win out the election, and Democrats somehow manage to keep the House of Representatives in 2022. The remaining Congress people who participated in the January 6th debacle, would you vote to remove them from committees, expel them? What would be the consequences, in your opinion? Or what should be?
Yeah, I mean that's a really tough question for me, in that it's I guess it'd be very case by case basis. I think there's a lot of blame to go around and a lot of culpability. Um, I think it would really depend on what level of involvement there. But I would hope that the people that were more actively involved, that they would face legal consequences for that, and that they would face consequences from the voters. But yeah, I mean, if there's someone that plotted to overthrow a free and fair election, and we're active involved in that, then I think it should be on the table that they should be removed from committees, certainly, and also we should have some more legal consequences as well. But we need to move forward as a country. January 6th is pivotal in why I got in this race, and it was the culmination of a lot of shift towards autocracy. We need to move beyond that and make sure that we safeguard a democracy. So, my first focus would really be on voting rights and getting the Voting Rights Act passed.
Yes.
In my mind, the partisan vitriol that we're seeing, I think social media is a huge impact of that, and all the algorithms that we saw from the Facebook whistleblower. But also, when we have these districts gerrymandered, you get a situation where the politicians that are elected and in office, they only have an incentive, at least from reelection, from pleasing their base. They can forget about the middle. We talked about how low turnout was in the primary, so they can just focus on policies that excite their base. And with the Republican Party right now, it's the Trump extremism. So they don't have to worry about being bipartisan. They don't have to worry about reaching across the middle. So with the near elimination of swing districts through this, the mapping technology that we have, like I can draw out your house and draw in mine, depending on, all these factors. You shouldn't have these crazy districts. We should have more compact districts. We should have, communities kept together so that they have a voice. And, look at Texas, particularly with the communities of color that were really all the growth that we saw in Texas from communities of color, in the way we just, really divided those communities and removed a lot of their voices in the process. It's just not what's good for democracy. And, I think on the racial side, we'll see, that is, unconstitutional. But I also think partisan gerrymandering, we need to get away from that. Both sides, of course, do it. You saw the map in New York was, pretty aggressive gerrymander from the Democrats as well, in response to all the stuff going on. But we need to move beyond that. We need to have competitive districts. We need to have politicians that are committed to serving all their constituents, regardless of party. And that's just not what we have with the current system right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we run out of time, I want to talk about my article that's coming out later today, because this is something that really bothered me a lot. I do not live in Keller. I do live in Tarrant County. Keller is in Tarrant County. However, it still really bothered me. The mayor and the city council of Keller gave Beth and Dwayne a key to their city. Now, this is a person who had their very own page on the Southern Poverty Law Center Hate Watch before they were even elected to Congress. So, for me, it's just baffling that they would give such a huge honor to somebody with such an extensive record of hate and Islamophobia. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's you mentioned all the the stuff prior to her even being elected. There's a lot of controversy there and the Islamophobia that she stirred up as mayor of Irving. For those that don't know, she publicly persecuted a Muslim high school freshman who brought a homemade clock to school
14-year-old.
that authorities mistook for a bomb. She defended the response. She called it a hoax bomb. And the city had to reach a settlement with the family. So she tries to bring out the worst in people, and that's my biggest besides her attack on democracy, that's my biggest criticism of her, that she tries to divide and anger and bring out the worst in us, and it's just failed leadership. It's not leadership at all. So I do have the city of Keller is welcome to do whatever they want to do if they think that's if she represents them. But I haven't seen anything in Congress that she's done for the district. The infrastructure law that's going to be here and provide great economic gains, I think, for this district as well. She voted against that. So what has she done other than stand against progress and try to turn back the clock? And try to if you subscribe to her newsletter, first, sorry for you having to see that, but follow her on social media. It's just all partisan vitriol. There's no substance there. There's no complexity or nuance. It's just all Biden inflation, and Democrats are trying to destroy the country.
And the border.
She even tweeted out, she's like, Democrats are trying to steal our seat. I mean, echoing language that Donald Trump used. So even after, the attack on the Capitol, she's still using that type of language. So, not someone that, I want to emulate, not someone that I would want my kids to emulate, and not someone that I would give the key to the city if I was the mayor. But
okay. So your race, I am very excited to see what happens in May. I'm even more excited to see how things go in November. Derrick Gay, you guys, he is a vet. He is a North Texas resident. I will let you wrap up your own speech.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I love coming on the show, and this is my first time on this platform, and I'll figure out how to stream to my own services and everything for next time. But it's an honor to be in this race. It's an honor to ask for people's vote and try to hear their voices and represent them, and be a representative that will represent all the people of the district. It's an extreme honor and responsibility, and it's something I won't take for granted. And I just want to say, we are facing some dark times, from the pandemic to the Trump years to January 6th to inflation, recession. People are struggling, but I'm an optimist, and I believe every generation has rose to meet those challenges, and I do fundamentally believe that our best still lies ahead. We need to fight for that future. We need to fight to preserve democracy. We need to fight to combat our shift towards autocracy. But I think that the Democratic Party. Well, I know that the Democratic Party is the only one right now that's trying to find those solutions and trying to provide for the people. So that show up and vote, show up and have your voice be heard. Because if you don't show up, nothing will improve. But we will do this together. Our best days are ahead of us, and we will create the society that we deserve to live in.
Okay. And real quick, what's your website?
Yes, my website. So it's my name.com. So it's DerrickGay, derrickgay.com. My Twitter handle is the same, at Derrick Gay. And, please reach out. I want to hear from you, and, I want to see what issues are top of mind for you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, Derrick. Let's talk again before the election.
Absolutely. Thank you so
All
much.
right, you have a good day.
You too. Take care. Bye. Hey.